Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yasharanandana Braja Janaranjana Yasharanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajaka Chaja Satara Sati Shri Srimad The Divine Grace of Bhagavatam Vinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajaka Chaja Satara Sati Shri Srimad His Divine Grace of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Swami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Brinda Ki Grantha Raj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaur Premanandi All glories to some of the devotees. All glories to some of the devotees. All glory to some of the devotees. All glories to Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga, and Srila Prabhupada. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Additional Pastimes. Chapter titled, Return to America. The Shastras enjoin, one can never know the mind of the Acharya. Since this is true, then how can we know Prabhupada? How can we share his inner life in those pleasant homecoming days of December 1967 and January 1968 in San Francisco? In one sense, we cannot. As Krishnadas Kaviraj says, I do not know the deep meaning of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's activities. As far as possible, I shall try to explain them externally. But sometimes Prabhupada reveals himself directly in his own words. I have returned by Krishna's grace. I am fit to serve you. We can enter his thoughts through his spoken words. Through those who knew him and lived with him, we have another intimate approach to Prabhupada's life. How they saw him and how they dealt with him. Often, this is as close as we can get. Mukunda Goswami. It was in this period that Prabhupada went to visit Mr. B.K. Nehru, who was a big Indian government official. I drove Prabhupada to the St. Francis Hotel and a beat-up old Ford with the name Krishna stenciled in multicolors in 3 different places on the car. This was the signature of the hippie era, decorating the cars and the buses and everything else. You can just imagine this beat-up old Ford. The St. Francis Hotel, of course, is a very elite hotel. We arrived at the front door and there was a doorman. I got out and asked him if we could leave the car in front of the hotel for about 15 minutes. Somehow, I don't know why, he immediately agreed to look after the car. We went up to one of the top floors of the building to a very beautiful suite. Mr. Nehru greeted us. He was wearing Western clothes, I was also wearing Western clothes, and my head wasn't shaved. Mr. Nehru's wife was also there. I sat on the same couch as Prabhupada, with Mr. Nehru in the middle and Prabhupada on the other end. In the beginning, they spoke English. Prabhupada reiterated some of his past life history and mentioned that he had a pharmacy called Prayag Pharmacy. He had met Mr. Nehru in India, and Mr. Nehru acknowledged that he knew about the pharmacy. Prabhupada then explained how he had taken sannyas. I noted that Prabhupada was very warm and friendly. It was a side of him I had never seen before. Not that he hadn't been warm and friendly, but to a non-devotee person. I had never seen him quite in such a friendly attitude. I was totally intrigued to see how open and almost intimate Prabhupada was becoming with this man. I noticed that Prabhupada was presenting himself as a mendicant, a sannyasi. And then the rest of the conversation took place in Hindi. It was a wonderful time for me to observe the facial expressions and gestures and the great depth of feeling with which Prabhupada communicated, because I had to try to guess what he was talking about. In fact, I was always speculating on what he might be saying. Then, of course, Mr. Nehru and sometimes his wife would interject remarks, all in Hindi. I was spinning enormous fantasies about what they all might be talking about. Prabhupada had introduced me as Michael Grant's secretary, and I was sitting on the top of the world from the beginning of the conversation. I felt that I had a stake in the conversation, and maybe Mr. Nehru is not aware that I am not understanding. I was very tuned in to the mood of the conversation, even though I was not understanding it, but thinking that maybe I was understanding part of it and trying to act as if I might know something about what they were saying. At some point in the conversation, I was getting very involved in my fantasies of what it was about, and I heard the words missionary work come from Prabhupada. He stopped and looked at me momentarily. There was a beat, and then the conversation resumed. I then realized that I had really been tuned in by that. Prabhupada was asking something. Then later in the conversation, he said in English, "But one word from you to Mr. Nehru." Then Srila Prabhupada's eyes opened wide and he paused, and I believe he looked around at me at that time. Then after a somewhat awkward silence, the conversation resumed again. Then I knew that Srila Prabhupada was really asking for a favor, and that he was letting me in on this by saying it in English. I felt that all I could do was try to look very serious and important somehow, such that this man would think that by my presence as an American disciple, he could see that Srila Prabhupada was doing great things by converting us Westerners to Krishna consciousness. Somehow I wanted to help, but I didn't know what it was, so I couldn't say. And I just tried to play the part that Srila Prabhupada seemed to want me to play in this transcendental game. Then the conversation became very convivial, and the subject had changed. Later, the wife of B.K. Nehru came forward and called Prabhupada Swamiji, and said something in Hindi and gave him something wrapped in tin foil. It was about the size of a small apple. Then they exchanged words, and Srila Prabhupada was very warm and cordial with Mrs. Nehru. On the way out, I asked Prabhupada, first of all, what the conversation was about. It was very vague, but said it was about some land that he'd been trying to get in India, I think in Vrindavan. It may have been in litigation, I don't know, but he was asking Mr. Nehru's help. I asked whether he was helping, and Srila Prabhupada was again rather vague about it. But he indicated that he felt the meeting was successful, or at least a step in the right direction. Then I asked about Mr. Nehru's wife, whether she was European or what. And Prabhupada said, no, she is a Parsi. Then on the ride back, Prabhupada opened a tin foil, and in it was a huge date, the biggest one I had ever seen in my life. And he took it out and took a big bite out of it, and then offered me the rest, which I took, of course. Srila Prabhupada ki. These are intimate pastimes that the devotees relish. There's nothing quite like it. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad Bhāgavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 30, Text 29. Chapter title, Description of Adverse Fruitive Activities. Ataiva narakak swarga. Atraiva narakak swarga. Iti matak prachakshate. Iti matak prachakshate. Ya yatana vainarakyas. Ya yatana vainarakyas. Taihapyapalakshitaha. Taihapyapalakshitaha. Please chant. Atraiva narakatsvaga. Atapachakshate. Sanga iti mata prachakshate yayatana vainarakya yayat vipalakshita. Ladies, atraiva nalakatsvaga iti mata prachakshate yayatana vainarakyas taihapyupalakshitaha. Atra, in this world, even Naraka, hell, Swarga, heaven, Iti, thus, Mata, O mother, Pratakshate, they say, Ya, which, Yatanaha, punishments, Vai, certainly, Narakyaha, hellish, Ta, they, Iha, here, Api, also, Upalakshitaha, visible. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Lord Kapila continued, my dear mother, it is sometimes said that we experience hell or heaven on this planet, for hellish punishments are sometimes visible on this planet also. Please repeat. Lord Kapila continued, my dear mother, it is sometimes said that we experience hell or heaven on this planet, for hellish punishments are sometimes visible on this planet also. Purport. Sometimes unbelievers do not accept these statements of Scripture regarding hell. They disregard such authorized descriptions. Lord Kapila therefore confirms them by saying that these hellish conditions are also visible on this planet. It is not that they are only on the planet where Yamaraj lives. On the planet of Yamaraj, the sinful man is given the chance to practice living in the hellish conditions which he will have to endure in the next life. And then he is given a chance to take birth on another planet to continue his hellish life. For example, if a man is to be punished to remain in hell and eat stool and urine, then first of all he practices such habits on the planet of Yamaraj, and then he is given a particular type of body, that of a hog, so that he can eat stool and think that he is enjoying life. It is stated previously that in any hellish condition, the conditioned soul thinks he is happy. Otherwise, it would not be possible for him to suffer hellish life. Translation again. Lord Kapila continued, my dear mother, it is sometimes said that we experience hell or heaven on this planet, for hellish punishments are sometimes visible on this planet also. Om Jnana Tamanda Shaganandana Slakaya Chaksur Militamana Tasmai Shri Guru Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Vankai Tegurum Yakipatamam Mande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. So just see the difference between the devotees' experiences and the sinful life of those who are condemned due to their past sinful activities. Suchinam Srimatam Gehe. Who can understand that Michael Grant, who later became Mukunda Goswami, got such opportunity to intimately associate with His divine grace? Sometimes we feel very, benedicted by the opportunity to serve Sri Sri Radha Govinda. And that intimacy develops into attachment. And this attachment continues to become something greater. So many of us experience this in relationship to Srila Prabhupada, that by serving him, by observing him in his intimate dealings, this affection became real. It wasn't just something that you tried to artificially impose. It was like Mukunda Goswami, Prabhupada gave him, after taking a bite out of the date, he gave it to Mukunda to as prasadam. Maha prasadam, this is called. That the prasadam from the deity is called Maha prasadam. And that prasadam, when it's taken and honored by the spiritual master, is called Maha prasadam. So why is it greater? How is it greater than the Maha prasadam offered to the deities? So this is something that's a very intimate secret, how the spiritual master, how his relationship with Krishna benedicts the devotee to such an extent. Greater than that, obviously, in this case, of having some Mahaprasadam from Radha Govinda. So when Henry Street, and Henry Street is in everyone's mind today, because everyone who had association with His Holiness Gopal Krishna Maharaj was there as a grahasta, living with his wife and son. And that was, and the grahasta ashram was across the street from Henry Street. It was on Kane. So the temple was at the intersection of Henry and Kane. And the temple was on Henry Street. And the grahasta ashram was catty corner on Kane itself. And so, of course, everyone who was there at some point had Prabhupada's association. And one instance, when Prabhupada was there in 75, there was, and whenever Prabhupada would come to the temple, it became even more crowded. It was a small building. The men were on one side, the ladies were on another. It was 2 brownstones. And at that time, we had over 80 plus brahmacharis living in these quarters. Very tight. Everybody sleeping on the floor. There was no beds or such in that day. Everybody had sleeping bags. You rolled them up in the morning, you wiped your spot. So it was very, very crowded. You could compare it to, in America, they would compare it to sardines, because when you would buy these things in a can, these fish, they're all packed up tight. So they would say, packed up like sardines on the floor, literally. Shoulder to shoulder, head to toe like this on a floor. So when Prabhupada would come, the temple would become even more crowded. And everyone was eager to get the opportunity to serve Srila Prabhupada. So I remember one time, myself and another devotee, Srila Das, we were downstairs doing the devotee laundry. And all of a sudden, this brahmachari who wasn't from our temple showed up looking quite bewildered, because it was easy to get lost in the Henry Street Temple. There was multiple passageways, because it was a brownstone built for servants. So servants had interior passageways which to go different places in the building. So he must have come down from Prabhupada's quarters. And Prabhupada's bathroom was in the basement. So he would come, take the stairs down. And then there was you could enter into the one room, which we called the cutting room, which was next to the kitchen. So he must have got lost. He's looking for a place to wash Prabhupada's plates, and he has the plates and he has Prabhupada's remnants on it. So when he showed up looking bewildered, completely lost, in another section of the sub-basement where we had the laundry room, he said, "Where do I wash Prabhupada's plates?" I said, "Those are Prabhupada's plates." He said, "Yes." I said, "Well, okay." So as an exchange, I said, "First give me all of the remnants, and then I'll show you how to get back to where you're supposed to be." So we had all the remnants, and myself and Srila Das, and very tasty. So you could see that Prabhupada had eaten. He had eaten off the orange rind, he'd eaten off the apple. And then on the plate there was a tomato and a potato. And this is breakfast time, and I'm looking, this is a boiled potato and a raw tomato. It wasn't until years later that and it had, of course, there was some, it was salty. But then we realized, later on when we went to India, that this is a type of fruit chaat. And you eat it salty. You put salt in the potato, the tomato, the apple, everything was salty. So that was nectar. We got Prabhupada's remnants, and then sent that devotee, escorted him out of the labyrinth of the basement of 439 Henry Street back up to Prabhupada's kitchen where he could wash the plates. So this is heaven, as opposed to what we're reading about hell. So they don't understand it. In the material world, you can easily juxtapose these two experiences. There's nothing like living in the temple. When people eventually go out, move out, become grihastas, you have to create a temple in your home to try to maintain that mood of service to the deity, to the spiritual master. Otherwise, the home is just an empty place, really. There's nothing there. Without the deity, without the devotees, without service, then that's matirna krishna paratak svatova, mitobi padyeti grahavritanam, adanta gobya vishatam tamisham, punat punaschavata chavananam. So we have to carefully analyze the two opportunities that we have, how we can stay close to our devotional roots. What we're learning here, what we're training here, is meant, of course. Prabhupada said every man should remain brahmachari and every lady should become married. So obviously, many people will become married. So you have to firmly resolve at this stage in life to develop that determination, discipline, and dedication that you can take with you into whatever ashram it is. You need the same determination, dedication, discipline ashram as you do in the grihastha ashram. There's not really any difference. Your service to Krishna is the same opportunities without any encumbrance. But you have to, there's no question that wherever you are, wherever you go, there will always be temptation. And so grihastha life is an opportunity to develop fortifications. It's called it's described as a fortress, the grihastha ashram, where one can protect from the external maya that pervades the material world. Because in it you have a complete unit to engage in service to the spiritual master and the Supreme Lord. So there's, otherwise, just like sometimes you see in the movies, you have the forest of material enjoyment. So you can imagine this forest, and in that forest there's so many dangers, wild animals, wild natives, wild whatever. And so your ashram becomes a fortress. So you have to take spiritual life seriously to that extent that you don't drop your defenses and think that, no, now I'm in this ashram, I can relax. I don't need to be so strict. And that's, sometimes we see that happens. That devotees then begin to do things that they previously gave up in their brahmachari life. And again, for whatever reason, think that, no, it's okay, now I'm a grahastha. License for sense gratification. Prabhupada used to call it like that. But it's not a license for sense gratification. It's meant to protect you, not to bewilder you. And so we have to, of course, these descriptions of the hellish planets are also very nice. If one has any faith, he understands that these are not just fairy tales meant to scare children, that these planets do exist, and that these hellish conditions are replicated here in the material world for all to see, if he has the eyes to see. I remember Karandar Prabhu was giving class one time. He had just come from wherever he was, so he came to 55th Street. And New York is, of course, much different than most cities in America. It's much more busy. Probably his room was on the 11th floor, and the next block over was a firehouse, a fire station. So at every hour of the day, the fire engines would come out, and it's their protocol that as soon as they exit the firehouse, they have to blast the horns and the sirens to announce that they're coming out, get out of the way. And so 24 hours a day, clang, clang, clang. Prabhupada would imitate the sound in the lectures. He'd say, there's a blazing fire. Blazing fire. And they would imitate the horn because you can't escape it in New York. Everywhere you go, but of course, we get used to it. But Karanda, when he came, he was amazed at how much sound, how many sirens, how many things. And he said that he saw that there was a person who died on the street. And immediately an ambulance came. At that time, it was they could jump out, they cover him up, and they put him in the ambulance and they scoop him away. And he said, you don't even get a chance to see death up close and personal. They hide it from you. Not on purpose, it seems, but the thing is, if you go to India, and someone dies, he's on the street for hours, maybe days, and the dead bodies laying everywhere. And so there it's very real. And so you can't escape that. But here, people forget that, yes, there's birth, death, old age, and disease. They don't, it's hidden. They know it's there, but it's disguised. It's covered over. They give it some. So Karanda was very struck by that fact, that, so we have that, and that's, of course, we're more or less alert and aware to the sufferings in the material world. For the devotee, it's not hidden, and he uses it instructively for his own edification. And he doesn't try to disguise it in his mind, internally or externally. He sees it, yes. I should escape this cycle of birth and death. I shouldn't perpetuate my existence here. I should do whatever is required. A person who is trying to save himself, he goes through so many stages of denial in order to, even a person who's drowning, they have that, they fight. They don't understand that somebody's trying to rescue them, and they're literally fighting the person who's trying to do it. there's such a struggle for survival. So we don't experience that in the normal course of our daily events. But we should understand, and then more and more in Kali Yuga, you see it happening everywhere. And so you shouldn't try to simply compartmentalize it. It's there for us to see for a particular reason, in order to be able to try to elevate the conditioned soul using things which are all around him that he's aware of, but he doesn't see. His eyes are closed. Sometimes they use that term, people have a different point of view, and they're completely in illusion. And you wonder when you're speaking to them, how can this person, he sees everything all around him, right? That's that verse, Matirna Krishna. Even by joint conferences, he cannot be convinced, that how he should extricate himself from this dark well, this Griya Mandakuma. He cannot. So the devotee has to be very expert, like the surgeon, to find out that part which is creating this illusion, to try to dispel it. Because now we have some knowledge, not extensively, but enough that when you're speaking to someone, you can find out what is his stumbling block that's keeping him from trying to come closer to reality. So this is, so the doctors like Toshan Krishna, who joined in the early days in San Francisco, he actually came to New York, but then he eventually surrendered on the West Coast. And he asked Prabhupada that if he should continue his medical studies. And Prabhupada said no. He says, we have enough doctors in the material world, there's so many doctors. He says, you should become a doctor of the soul. So this is our calling, so to speak. Not that we should perpetuate, although we understood that if one is a grihastha, then he must have his service, like Prabhupada, who kept Gopal Krishna Maharaj in his job, and then Maharaj was in the advertising industry. And Prabhupada used to constantly tell him, no, you keep that job. Even when you become GBC, you keep that job. There's so many devotees were asking, should Maharaj do? No, you should keep this job. Because first of all, he was a grihastha at the time. So we understand that, Prabhupada had his way of engaging his disciples so that everything was accomplished, that they were able to conduct their lives with determined and dedication to the Supreme Lord, and simultaneously caring for their family or their children or whatever was necessary. And this, because he knew that by doing so, they were going to get the benefit. And of course, this benefit is ultimately coming through Srila Prabhupada, from Krishna. He's the one who's awarding these Om Jnana Tamrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya. We're asking, we see that the spiritual master is opening our eyes. We know that Krishna is Sarvasya Chaham Riddhi Sani Vishnu. He's in the heart. But he's in the heart of even the hog. He's not opening the hog's eyes. He's only opening the eyes of the devotees who are surrendered to the spiritual master. Tadvidi pranipatena pariprasthena sevaya. This upadekshanti te gyanam jnana tattva. This tattva darshana is coming from those who have seen the truth. So this is, we have to really concentrate on this tadvigyanartam sagarum eva bigachet. This is such an important thing. It's emphasized everywhere we see it, but still sometimes we think, well, no, I can just read on my own, or, I've officially taken initiation, and then now I'm doing self-study. But this self-study, how is this going to help if you haven't developed surrender? Are you surrendering to the tape recorder, or are you surrendering to the book? How are you surrendering? You have to engage in some service. So of course the temple is specifically meant for that. This is the spiritual master's house. This is the Guru Kul. It may not appear that way because we associate Guru Kul with children. But this is the house of the spiritual master, and this is where we're engaging in those activities through which the realization awarded by the spiritual master. Only he, it's only Guru Krishna Kripai by Bhakti. It is not internally coming from us. We cannot attain anything through our individual efforts. It's only by the mercy of the spiritual master. And so we try to implement whatever we have learned and put it into action. It doesn't, theoretically, one cannot advance in spiritual life. Harava bhaktasya kato mahaguna manorate nasita daivato. You develop all the good qualities, yashasti bhakti. There's so many things. All the good qualities of demigods. How? By engaging in the service of the spiritual master. Automatically. But still someone is thinking, no, I have to study independently, I have to study independently. We have to simply read what Prabhupada has given us. Hear from the lotus lips of the spiritual master. If one is not satisfied with that, then real faith has not developed. He thinks I have to get it somehow or other, some other source. So this is illusion. To not have the complete faith in the chanting of the holy names, and who has given us the holy name, and how is it passed through us? It's coming by Harinam. This Diksha is a great benediction. And it's through that channel, that medium, that everything is achieved. But somehow or other, still we think that, no. So we have, it's not complicated. Simple for the simple at heart, difficult for the crooked. And Prabhupada gave very clear instructions. Not difficult. But we make it difficult for some reason, unnecessarily. Prabhupada used a term very judiciously. He said, over-intelligent. Sometimes we see that. We have examples. Someone who is over-intelligent. Even in the material world, sometimes someone will say, Prabhu, well, they don't say Prabhu. They say, you're overthinking this. You're overthinking this. Action is better than inaction. Even sometimes people say, no, I have to wait. I want to get it just right. That's not always an acceptable solution. Sometimes you have to act. 90% success is better than 100% failure. So we have to be able to analyze. And what did Prabhupada say in the purport to the 10th chapter, in that 4th and 5th verse? He said, intelligence means to analyze things in their proper perspective. So this is, if we take away anything from what we're studying or how we're studying, how do we approach our studying, then that analysis has to be there. And how do we get that perspective? We get that perspective by hearing from the spiritual master, try understanding to the extent possible through his purports. This is why we have the Bhaktivedanta purports. We don't have to try to strain our brain and understand this shloka independently with our tiny brains. What is that verse? Atmavan manyate jagat. Atmavan manyate jagat. Someone is trying to see things through the lens of his own worldly experience. He sees things through his own mind. He thinks everything is to be understood through his perception. Atmavan manyate jagat. But this is not possible. And in English, they say, seeing the world through rose-colored glasses. Because everything is tinted, he sees, so he thinks everything is good. That's why they say everything is rosy. But this is a fool's, paradise. He's so oblivious, he doesn't understand. What is that suffering right there? Like the animal munching on grass, next to the slaughterhouse, waiting in the queue, waiting in the line. And he does say, everybody, all the other animals have already gone in. And we see that in the material world. So many people are lined up to do something. Just because the first person, they just blindly follow. Blind following the blind. So we have to follow that person who is fully enlightened. Those are the preceptors, spiritual masters instructing spiritual masters. We don't have to be so, how can you say? We have to be sincere. Because when you're sincere, then automatically the correct source will be manifest to you. So this is the key. Prabhupada told us that sincerity is the single most important ingredient for success in spiritual life. And it seems so simplistic. But this sincerity is what invokes the mercy of the spiritual master in Krishna. It is not by some expertise that, Prabhupada, I can do something better than this devotee. Even sincerely doing something what seems insignificant, just washing the pots, cleaning the floor. Krishna is situated within the heart. He sees everything. So this is not, I remember my godbrother Sadaputa. Sadaputa didn't come in wearing a label that said, I'm a PhD candidate or I'm a double PhD. No, he didn't. He came in and he just said, can I do some service? I want to engage. And we didn't know who Sadaputa was. We engaged him in washing the pots. Because that's what everybody did when you came to the temple. Wash the pots. It was only later that we found out that, this person has something much more that he can offer if he's engaged properly. But the first thing was he was sincere. And so Prabhupada noticed. Everybody noticed. This is something, it's not hidden. When a person is sincere, everybody said, he's sincere. And how is it seen? Because you can understand. Because he does the service very nicely. He's very attentive. He does it without hesitation, without complaining. He doesn't try to hide from it. No. Because ultimately we know that service is the medium by which we approach Krishna. Krishna is saying, Sarvadhamma pratyaja mamekam sharanam. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. What does that surrender mean? We don't walk around all day long with our hands upraised. We do that when we chant the holy name, but it's not that I walk around saying, yes, Krishna. Just one time, if one is sincere, right in that pastime, I forget which kanda in the Ramayana. From this day forward, Lord, I am yours. And Lord Chaitanya repeated that. That is how we should regularly adjust our mind. That from this day forward, I am yours. So it is every day. But that dedication and that rededication, that constant mental focus, that vyavasaya megabuddhir ekeha kurunandana, when in the Bhagavad Gita it says having one pointed attention, what does that mean? One pointed attention on what? There's one pointed attention is on our relationship with the spiritual master, the representative of Krishna, in order to achieve the highest goal of life. There's no other way. But still we have that tendency due to material contamination that I should know. When I joined, before I joined, I was working in the New York Public Library. I was telling Prabhu yesterday. Because I was thinking, I'll find the truth here. If I can't find the truth here, it can't be found. It was the biggest repository of books in the world at that time. You know, we had centuries ago, millennia ago, we lost the library at Alexandria and all these other huge compilations, all world history, all lost. Who knows what was in there? But I'm thinking, I didn't like college. College was useless, just simply trying to indoctrinate you. You know, and I picked up on that pretty quick, but I thought, okay, let me just give it at least a year. Because that's, you know, you can say that, how otherwise. Somehow or other in that year, City University of New York, Lehman College, Kingsbridge campus, way uptown, way up in the Bronx. Somehow or other, I remember one day there was a flyer that said that Allen Ginsberg was coming to read his new book. So we were all hippies at that time, 1970 or so. And he came and he brought his harmonium, and what did he do? He chanted Hare Krishna. So we were there chanting Hare Krishna. Just Krishna arranged that somehow or other you get to hear it. We used to hear it all the time in the village, but I thought this is another coincidence that says this guy, he's a poet, he's a beat poet, everybody knows, and he's chanting Hare Krishna. So we chanted. And then I would go to work at the library on 42nd Street. And the window, the department, I worked in the economics division, and those windows faced Fifth Avenue. So all day long, the devotees are chanting on Fifth Avenue. I'm hearing this mantra all the time. It didn't register, I wasn't thinking. It's part of the New York scene, that the Hare Krishnas are there outside chanting. And we would sit on the steps and, you know, do some nonsense, and somehow or other, one time I was reading Bhagavad Gita. I had a small penguin version of some Mayavadi Gita that because I came to the library to find the truth, and I'm reading everything. At some point, the Gita came into focus, but it was, of course, the wrong Gita. So I was sitting, and the devotee, and of course, everybody knew that if devotees approach you, they're going to ask for money. Sell you a book, sell you incense, whatever. Well, we also knew that you could get prasadam, a luglu, famous prasadam in New York City. So this devotee started walking straight at me. I'm thinking, okay, I'll get a luglu, give him 10 cents. That's okay. Get rid of him. You know, I don't have to. I'm on my lunch, so I don't want to waste time talking to the Hare Krishnas. So, but somehow or other, I had a challenging mood because we were rebels. I said to him, what do you guys have to do with Krishna? You're out here dancing, chanting in the streets, wearing these funny clothes. What do you have to do with Krishna? I'm reading Bhagavad Gita. It's taking place on a battlefield. What do you... And they said, the devotee, I think it was Lohi Taksha, but I'm not 100% sure. He said, what Bhagavad Gita are you reading? So I pulled out my little paperback. I showed him, and he said, that's not Bhagavad Gita. And he pulled out the big 1972. So he pulled out this big Macmillan edition. That was the first one they used to have the purple one, with Thomas Merton. I had seen that one, but I never bought it. But this huge book, and he said, this is Bhagavad Gita. So then I said, oh, okay, but I didn't want to take it at the time. But I took a luglu and I took an invitation card. And eventually I ended up going to Henry Street, meeting the devotees and having them answer all of my questions, because that was very challenging. And I said, these guys really have their act together. They know the philosophy, everything. So this is how it begins, essentially, through prasadam, through hearing and chanting. This agyata sukriti. You don't know how it comes. Hearing it from Allen Ginsberg and then hearing it on the street all the time for, as long as I was working there. They would be on that corner a couple of days a week, 5th Avenue and 42nd Street, in front of the library. And then eventually, I would be there as well, with them, chanting to someone else in the library, doing the same thing that they were doing. So it goes full circle like that, chanting in the same place. But it was a little tricky in New York. I felt a little uncomfortable going on the street because I had this is where I'm from, so all these relatives, I was thinking my friends are going to see me out here and it did. Of course, it did happen like that. They would say, hey, what are you doing out here with these guys? But that's okay. That's part of it. That's part of, the test. Krishna wants to say, do you want the old or do you want the new? This is finished. You already did that. Chewing the chewed. It's done. You didn't get pleasure with those guys for years and years. You tried everything you could possibly do. So what was the point? So I was happy to have my new friends, the devotees. So that was nice. So anyway, New York is very special. And we're remembering Gopal Krishna Maharaj at this time. And he's going back to be with ISKCON in the spiritual world. Prabhupada said that there is a special place. And who can say? Prabhupada is giving us a definitive reality that there is ISKCON in the spiritual world. He told us that. It was when we heard that, we thought, how is that possible? Because, spiritual world, Goloka, that's eternal. So does that mean ISKCON is eternal? What does that mean? Anyway, Prabhupada was telling us these things. We just accept it. We know that Lord Chaitanya is there. So obviously, if Lord Chaitanya is there, and everything associated with Lord Chaitanya must also be there. And there's no question that this branch of the Chaitanya tree, ISKCON, is a very prominent branch, not a small branch. So we can look forward to this association, even in the spiritual world. And we can reject this hellish vision. We've seen hell. They used to have, my friends, because I was part of that generation, many of my friends went to Vietnam, and many didn't come back. But those that came back, they used to have a jacket, it was very popular, that said, on the back, it said, when I die, I'm going to heaven, because I've spent my time in hell. Because being in a war, Guru Kripa Maharaj was a medic. And he would tell us stories sometimes, the most horrific things you can't imagine. The most horrific things of having to tend to people who are wounded on the battlefield. Horrendous. And they're going to die, but you don't tell, you just try to say, okay, take it easy, buddy, you'll pull through. But no. It's completely blown open, everything exposed, guts hanging out. It's slow and painful death. But for sure, death is coming. He said he suffered, the only thing that saved him was becoming a devotee, because he was suffering from what they call, now they know what it's called, PTSD. They didn't know what it was in those days. They called it battlefield fatigue or different things like that, shock. Yeah, post-traumatic stress syndrome. He said, if not, I would have been dead. I would have committed suicide, I would have drunk myself to death or somehow or other. He said, no, but Prabhupada saved her. Prabhupada saved a whole generation. Any questions or comments? Uh-oh, Bhakti Counter's looking. Wait, someone's in the back. Howdy, Bo.
So you talk about Siddhapatha Prabhu. So Siddhapatha Prabhu published various research papers and books.
Come closer. This reverberation can hardly hear it.
So you told about Siddhapatha Prabhu, and you said that Siddhapatha Prabhu published various research papers and books demonstrating the teachings of Bhāgavatam. Now one might say that that's not a direct way of preaching, it's an indirect way. The direct way is more like Lord Chaitanya going out and Nam Sankirtan or giving Sunday classes, which is directly preaching Bhāgavatam. Whereas the way he was doing it is more of an indirect way. So what would you say about that?
About indirect?
Yeah, is it an indirect way to teach, publishing research paper, publishing books, using your knowledge of PhD? Is it somehow less than the direct way of preaching, where you're directly speaking Bhagavatam like this, or going to Harinam Sankirtan?
It all depends on, first of all, this interaction, how we come in contact. This is called a Gyata Sukriti. It's not random, it's not indiscriminate. You're in a particular time and place due to Krishna's arrangement, due to your past bhakti activities. Suchinam Srimatam Gehe. So nothing is by chance. And so it's not indirect, technically it's direct. Just that it happened without your knowledge. It's an unknown factor. So your lining up, your coming in contact is already predestined. Just like all of your presence here is technically predestined. And what you do with it, that's a different story. You could leave tomorrow and never come back. In one sense that you forfeited the opportunity that you were given. You were given one chance in this lifetime to make the contact permanent, at least in this lifetime. As a matter of fact, one of my godbrothers, when he saw, because when I first started coming to the temple, I wasn't committed. I thought I found something very nice, and it was very satisfying intellectually, and it was satisfying the prasadam was delicious. Who can deny the great thing? So I was coming Sunday feast, and I was having these conversations, and I had given up most of my bad habits. And so I thought, now I've got the best of both worlds. So I didn't feel like I needed to move in, although that devotees are always trying to, you're serious, you should probably try to commit. And I was like, I'm not ready yet. We'd say I'm not, different excuses. But that's the remnants of your impersonal conception of God. Right? What is that famous line Prabhupada wrote? Stanza. Absolute ascension thou hast proved, impersonal calamity thou hast removed. Absolute ascension. So we're not seeing. I was in the temple room, I was chanting with the devotees, and Radha Govinda were there, but I wasn't focused on Radha Govinda as anything other than part of the decoration in the temple. You don't understand who the deities are, what they are. But then there's the word, but gradually the understanding from the association, these things become clear. But still there was no commitment. So this one devotee was telling me, first Gaur-Hari, always, every time he would see me, he would say, when are you going to surrender? That was Gaur-Hari. That was a very sweet devotee, early devotee. He would just say, when are you going to surrender? I said, no response. What am I going to say? I don't know. I wasn't. But then this other devotee gave me a chance to serve Prabhupada in a very intimate way. I was a handy person, and there was many things broken in Prabhupada's room and needed to be fixed. And Prabhupada was coming, so he said, you can do these things? I said, yeah, I can, no problem. Broken windows, replaced the window, yes, know how to do glazing points, whatever, did it all, fix it all. And then he said to me, you've been coming for some time now. I said, but for some reason you're not, Krishna is extending this invitation to you. And Krishna's a person. And how many times do you think he's going to extend this invitation before he just forgets about you? Because you're not accepting. And then I thought, it struck me for some reason, and maybe it wouldn't strike another person. Krishna is inviting you and you're not accepting his invitation. At some point he's going to stop inviting you. I thought, I don't want that to happen. Well, then everything fell into place. Prabhupada was coming. I said, I should try this. I should at least try this, just like I thought when I was try college, but college was useless. And here we are talking to all the boys here going to school. Just put it on record, college is useless, but that's okay. Prabhupada said you have to have a job at some point. But I said, let me at least, I've wasted so many years in the material, let me give it a little time. And so then by hearing directly from the lips of the pure devotee, all these things which we had sort of understood intellectually, this is the key. There's the difference, the gap between, what's that verse? Prabhupada always quotes it, Satyam Eight qualities of Brahman. Samodamo tapaso cham shanti ajo mevacha. So there's jnanam vijnanam. So there's knowledge, this is book knowledge, and then vijnan, which is realized knowledge. So you know those two words, right? Jnanam vijnanam. So everything that we're doing until the point of surrender is just superficial, intellectually, through the lens of that Atmavam Mandite Jagat, our material experience. And then eventually, there's Vijnanam. And that comes from accepting the spiritual master. And it was tangible. Everyone has the same experience. If you talk to any devotee who met Prabhupada in that time and place, he said, yes. At somehow or other, when we accepted the spiritual master with our heart and soul, then everything became clear. And of course, then you have to decide what to do with that clarity. How are you going to focus it? How are you going to commit? So that's a bit of a challenge, because some people are thinking, no, I still have some material things I have to do. I have to do this, I have to do that. I can't surrender. So everybody has to have their Gaur-Hari, who's saying, when are you going to surrender? When are you going to surrender? So that has to be there. When are you going to surrender? Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhāgavatam ki jai. His Holiness Gopal Krishna Maharaj ki jai. Jai. ISKCON New York City Shri Radha Govinda Temple ki jai. All the devotees serving their lordships.